Well, Congress has passed it, and Biden will likely sign the new massive infrastructure bill into law soon. So, what are the specifics of the new EV incentive bill, and how might it change the way we buy our EVs and hybrids in the US? Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So first of all, I want to point out that some parts of this bill are still being rewritten after they've already been approved by the Senate and the House. So we'll see exactly how all of the details work out. But anyway, this is what we know so far. So first of all, the credit is still $7,500 for new cars, but with a whole bunch of caveats that didn't used to be there. There's also now up to a $4,000 credit for used vehicles, but that is really restrictive. The big change for Tesla and for GM as well is that the 200,000 vehicle limit has been lifted and has been replaced by a 10-year window. So basically January 1st of 2023 to December 31st of 2032. Also, as I said in the introduction, hybrid vehicles will still count for this BEV credit, which is a little bit ridiculous. I'm sure Toyota had a lot to do with that. Essentially, all you need is a 7 kilowatt hour battery in the car, and you can have a gas engine in it as well, and it still qualifies for this EV tax credit. Of course, I and Rob Maurer and many of you as well, I'm sure, really find this detestable that gasoline engines will count for an EV credit, where the point of this entire credit was supposed to be to push everyone towards new energy vehicles and also other things which we'll talk about in just a minute. But it still seems a little ridiculous that we're going to be including gasoline engines in a credit that will expire a decade from now. One other major change with this bill, but it's not going to help Tesla purchasers, is that you will be able to use this money point of sale if you purchase from a dealership, a dealership. But basically what you have to do to get the credit immediately, as opposed to waiting to file it with your taxes the next year, is you have to purchase the vehicle, either new or used, from an authorized dealership who can then write the check essentially and put it in as a down payment or however you want to use that money. But if you purchase from someone like Tesla that does direct to consumer sales, you will have to instead wait until the next tax year and file it with your taxes and get a rebate on your taxes. So of course, as you might expect, the dealership lobby has been very instrumental in making sure that that was put in place as well. So the $7,500 tax credit that was put in place about a decade ago was really pretty simple. Car manufacturers that made BEVs or plug-in hybrids, which at the time I have to admit was a reasonable compromise. It's not anymore, but 10 years ago it was. But basically, you would get $7,500 tax break from these manufacturers until they produce 200,000 vehicles per company, at which point the tax credit would go away. This new one is substantially more complicated. First of all, for SUV and pickups, there's a cap of $80,000 for the vehicle price. And for sedans, the cap is $55,000. And of course, the cap of 200,000 vehicles per company has been lifted now, which will enable Tesla and GM to gain access to these credits again, assuming that they're able to jump all of the other hurdles. So in terms of the price cap, obviously the Tesla Model S and Model X are out because they're both far too expensive. The Model Y at $66,000 and $70,000 are okay for the credit at this point, since they're both less than $80,000. But the question becomes, if you purchase the full self-driving package with that, which is another $12,000, that would put the Model Y Performance out of range of the $80,000. So it's not clear whether it's the base price of the vehicle or the price with all of the options that will determine whether it goes over that $80,000. And then we get to the Model 3, which is a little more interesting case. The rear-wheel drive car is $47,000 right now, so that easily fits under the $55,000 cap, but the Performance is $63,000, and you can't buy the long range right now, so it's unclear exactly what price that will be when that comes back again. So it's very possible that only the rear-wheel drive Model 3 will be under the $55,000 cap and thus qualify for the credit. So this does raise a really interesting question of what Tesla will do in the future about raising their prices. If they raise the price of the Model 3 by $8,000, the Model Y long range by $14,000, or the Model Y Performance by $10,000, that would put them all over the caps in their respective categories. So would Tesla do that, or will they raise the price to just under each of those caps? I don't know, but it is an interesting question for Tesla as they think about pricing going into the future. My personal prediction is that assuming Teslas will be eligible for the rebate, and we're going to talk about that more in just a second. Assuming that that's true, what Tesla will do is they will raise the prices to just a little bit under the cap so that people will qualify for that credit, but also Tesla will end up making more profit. So it's kind of a win-win for them and for the consumer as well to some extent, although it'll be kind of a wash for us consumers. The companies that this is really going to hurt, on the other hand, are companies like Rivian and Lucid, which are just startup companies, but have prices that start way above these caps, and so they won't be eligible for these vehicle incentives anymore. So I know Rivian at least is telling people to purchase their cars or make a binding agreement before the end of 2022 to make sure that they grandfather in before the new EV incentive rules take effect in 2023. As for Tesla with full self-driving, that's a really interesting question. This could very well drive everybody to the subscription model because people will want to purchase the car and get the credit, and then what they'll do is they'll just pay $200 or so per month for full self-driving, as opposed to spending $12,000 or more and thus not getting the credit. Assuming that that actually does affect it, it's possible that the full self-driving option might not affect it, but of course we'll have to wait for the final version of the EV incentive bill to come out to know exactly how all of that stuff is going to work. A few more wrinkles to this new bill. The first wrinkle is that consumers who make over $150,000 as individuals or couples who make over $300,000 taxable income will no longer be eligible for this incentive. In my mind, this makes some sense because it means that people who are making a great deal of money are not getting this benefit as well. So I find that somewhat reasonable, although probably something like a phase out or something like that rather than a hard cutoff might have made more sense. As for used vehicles, there is up to $4,000 credit available, but there's an awful lot of gotchas to this. First of all, it can only be 30% of the cost of the vehicle up to $4,000, which means I guess if you bought a $10,000 vehicle, you would only get $3,000 credit. As far as income caps, it's only $75,000 for an individual, $112,000 for a head of household individual, or $150,000 for a couple. So obviously it's a much lower cap in terms of income for people to still qualify for this. Also, the credit can only be used once every 3 years by a couple, and it can only be used once per vehicle. So that means that after the first resale, if you use the credit, you don't get the credit in the future. Also, the car has to be at least 2 years old, which is fairly reasonable, and the car has to sell for less than $25,000, which seems pretty ridiculous. And it has to be purchased directly from a dealership, or excuse me, I mean a dealership. So anyway, you've got a lot of restrictions on the used car thing. I don't think in the near term this will have a lot of effect, but it could have an effect as vehicles get older. Like if you own your car 6 or 7 or 8 years, put 150,000 miles on it, that car could easily drop less than $25,000 value at that point. So then it could qualify. But in the short term, with the price of electric vehicles and everything, $25,000 cap is a pretty low bar. And I think that people are not going to get an awful lot of benefit out of this just yet. One other little wrinkle that I didn't know about until I was researching this is that there will be up to $40,000 in incentives for semis and vans. This actually will really help Rivian out because of course they are manufacturing vans for Amazon. It will also help out Tesla a lot because their semis are, $150,000, $200,000, something along those lines. So anyway, having a $40,000 credit is a huge amount of money off of the cost of one of these vehicles. And now we get into the nitty-gritty about how all of this stuff is going to be really difficult for car companies to actually accomplish. The first thing is the car has to be assembled in North America. Note that is not the United States, even though all the politicians are saying made in America and all of that kind of stuff. Well, it's actually made in North America. So Canada and especially Mexico are in for this. I feel pretty strongly that there are a lot of lobbyists for GM that were pushing for this since GM has so many manufacturing plants in Mexico at this point. Interestingly enough, that one restriction, according to a Reuters article that I read, will exclude 70% of plug-in vehicles that are not manufactured in North America. So that's a pretty substantial reduction in the number of vehicles that will have access to this credit. And of course, as should surprise just about nobody, it's really designed to hurt Chinese companies as they try to muscle into the United States. But of course, they could do something like VinFast is doing and build a manufacturing plant in the United States to get around this made in North America issue. And then we get to the real kicker, which is also why I'm wearing this shirt today, which is the 4680 battery, like from the top. If you're interested in this shirt, it's available in the merch store. Just check it out. Anyway, the real restriction is where the battery minerals have to be mined and how they have to be manufactured. And interestingly enough, the Congressional Budget Office says that this restriction is going to make it so that only about 11,000 vehicles will qualify in 2023 for this credit. That is not very many vehicles vehicles being sold on the roads. So on day one, on January 1st of 2023, 40% of the materials in the batteries must be made from North America or countries with which North America has free trade agreements. And I'll run a list along this as I'm talking, but basically most of these countries are not going to be countries that are mining a ton of minerals. The one exception to this is Australia, which could actually come out a really, really big winner in this whole thing. They do have access to a ton of minerals that are used in battery manufacturing, and they are one of the few that have a free trade agreement with the United States. And thus I think that they're the most important country outside the United States, Canada, and Mexico to be able to produce qualifying minerals for these batteries. And every year in the future, the percentage of battery minerals actually goes up by 10% to I think 80% is the maximum cap. So it's going to be a major restriction considering that China controls most of the minerals that are used in batteries at this point. And speaking of China, starting in 2024, you can't have content from a country that is an entity of concern. So this could easily include most Chinese companies or China itself. So yeah, things have gotten a lot more confusing than they were. Basically, the bill went from very simple, you buy a plug-in, you get $7,500, to very complex. Buy a car that's less than this if you make less than this, and the car has this much mineral content from not China, and the car is assembled in North America. So things have gotten a lot more complicated than they were. I'm not sure if there's a huge amount of benefit, except to companies like GM that have been lobbying very hard to get rid of that 200,000 unit cap. And of course, as Rob Maurer and others have pointed out, this seems to actually favor plug-in hybrids over battery electric vehicles. So remember, a plug-in hybrid has about 1/10 of the battery capacity at about 7 kilowatt hours. So basically getting the mineral content for those batteries is going to be much, much easier, 10 times easier, than it will be for full-on BEVs that have 75 kilowatt hour or more battery content. So basically companies that are manufacturing hybrid vehicles with tiny batteries might be able to get this credit, whereas actual BEVs that are doing what the US government is purporting to be doing, which is to transition to greener energy, more sustainable energy, won't be able to get this credit. So in the short term, this might actually push hybrids over pure BEVs, which is the opposite of what we really need and seems to me fairly ironic. And of course, the used car situation seems even stupider to me. The $25,000 cap on vehicles means that very few are even going to count in the next several years. But hey, on the good end of things, at least the United States won't be wasting as much money on these EV credits as we thought they would. So that's good, right? All right, I hope you found this episode fun and thought-provoking and enjoyable. If you did, please do like it so other people can find it. And of course, consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. I truly do appreciate it. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description.
And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have Tesla Bot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, Success is a Possible Outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And for those of you interested in investing, check out WeBull, an amazing platform for buying and selling stocks, and now cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Dogecoin, and others. Open an account and get a free stock valued at up to $200, and fund your account and get another free stock valued at up to $1,600. Check out the link in the description and help the channel at the same time. Thank you.
And finally, don't forget we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a power wall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.